On my 18th birthday, they looked me in the eyes and said they wished I'd never been born. I stood up from that table and whispered words I didn't fully understand yet. Then I'm dead. Everyone laughed. They thought I was being dramatic. But 6 years later, I found a folder hidden in my husband's desk with my name on it. Signed by a doctor I'd seen before, and suddenly everything made sense. The missing photos, the cold stares, the way my mother's hands trembled when I asked too many questions. They didn't just wish I wasn't born. They had a plan for it. I still remember the weight of that photo album in my hands. 8 years old, standing in our dining room while the afternoon sun cut through the lace curtains my mother starched every Sunday. The album was leather-bound, dark green, with gold lettering that read Pierce Family Memories. I'd seen it on the shelf my whole life, but never dared to open it. That day, someone had left it on the table. Maybe my Aunt Sheila. Maybe God himself wanted me to see. I flipped through the pages slowly, carefully, the way you handle something that doesn't belong to you. There was Caleb at 1-year-old, cake smashed across his face. My mother laughing in a way I'd never seen her laugh at me. Caleb at 2, opening presents in the living room. I recognized. Caleb at 3, 4, 5, every single birthday documented like historical record. The photos were labeled in my mother's perfect handwriting. Caleb's 6th birthday, June 1984. Caleb's first bike, July 1985. Page after page of my brother's life, celebrated and preserved. Then I looked for mine. I turned back to 1980, the year I was born. Nothing. I checked 1981, my first birthday. Empty slots where photos should have been. Just the cream-colored pages staring back at me. 1982, 1983, 1984. Nothing, nothing, nothing. It was like I didn't exist. Like I'd never blown out candles or opened a single present. My hands started shaking. I was 8 years old and I was looking at proof that I didn't matter. My mother walked in carrying folded laundry. And I didn't even think before I asked, "Mom, where are my birthday pictures?" She didn't stop folding, didn't even look at me. Her hands moved mechanically, creasing a pillowcase into perfect thirds. "Hannah, don't be dramatic. We didn't have a camera then," just like that flat final. But I'd seen the camera. It sat in the hallway cabinet in a brown leather case, right next to Dad's old fishing gear. I'd held it before, felt its weight, clicked the button that didn't work anymore. We'd had a camera the whole time. I wanted to argue, but something in her face told me not to. That coldness she could put on like a coat. So I closed the album and walked away, feeling smaller than I ever had before. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my narrow bed listening to the house settle, and that's when I heard voices downstairs. My Aunt Sheila had come over late, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the tone. Low, urgent. I crept to the top of the stairs and sat in the darkness, holding my breath. Sheila's voice came first, tight with frustration. "You're going too far, Veronica. She'll notice." And then my mother's voice, so cold it made my skin prickle. She was never supposed to be in the pictures in the first place. I didn't understand what that meant. Not then. I pressed my forehead against the stair rail and tried to make sense of it, but I was 8, and the words felt too big, too terrible. Never supposed to be in the pictures. Did she mean I wasn't supposed to exist at all? I sat there until my legs went numb, until the voices stopped and I heard Aunt Sheila's car pull away. Then I crawled back to bed and stared at the ceiling until morning came. The envelope appeared 2 days later. I saw it when I came home from school, lying on the dining table right where the photo album had been. Manila, official looking, with a red seal on the back. The label read Pierce Family Record, Confidential, in typed letters. I stood there staring at it, my backpack still on my shoulders. There were 3 names listed on the front. Veronica Pierce, Walt Pierce, Caleb Pierce. My name wasn't there. I was 9 feet away from it, close enough to reach out and tear it open, but I didn't. Something stopped me. Fear, maybe, or the certain knowledge that whatever was inside would change everything. I walked past it, went to my room, did my homework. But that envelope lived in my mind from that day forward, growing heavier with every year that passed. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was being dramatic, just like my mother always said. But deep in my chest, in that place where children know things they can't explain, I understood something was wrong. Something about me, about my place in this family, had been wrong from the very beginning. I just didn't know how wrong. Not yet. Not until 10 years later, when they would stand in front of me on my 18th birthday and say the words that would shatter me completely, the words I'd spent my whole life afraid to hear. And when they finally said them, when the truth came out in that room with the birthday cake nobody touched, I would look at my mother's face and realize she'd been waiting for that moment since the day I was born. Waiting to finally tell me why I was never supposed to be in those pictures, why I was never supposed to be at all. By the time I reached high school, the lines in our family were drawn in permanent ink. Caleb was the sun, and the rest of us were just satellites lucky enough to orbit him. He was varsity captain by sophomore year, the kind of boy who got his name announced at Friday night games while the whole town stood and cheered. Prom king junior year. Youth group leader at our church. Pastor Milford used to hold him up during sermons as an example of righteous living. And my mother would sit in the third pew, glowing like she'd personally sculpted him from holy clay. I was the other one, the quiet Pierce girl who reshelved books at the school library during lunch and turned in essays 2 days early that teachers skimmed and forgot. I wasn't bullied, but I wasn't seen either. I existed in the margins of my own family, in the spaces between their conversations about Caleb's scholarship offers and football stats. By 18, I'd gotten used to it, or at least I thought I had. When my 18th birthday came around in March of 1998, my mother announced we'd be having a small dinner. Just family, she said. Just tradition. The way she said it made my stomach tight because I knew what tradition meant in our house. It meant another opportunity to highlight everything Caleb had accomplished and everything I hadn't. Another evening of forced smiles and passive comments about my future that nobody actually cared about. But I agreed because what else was I supposed to do? It was my birthday. I kept hoping, stupidly, that maybe this year would be different. The dining room table was set for 9 that Saturday evening. My mother had used the good china, the kind with the blue rim that we only brought out for Easter and Christmas. I came downstairs in the only nice dress I owned, a navy blue thing I'd worn to Caleb's graduation the year before, and found them all already seated. My mother, Veronica, at the head of the table, her hair sprayed into submission, wearing pearls like we were dining with the governor. My father, Walt, beside her, quiet as always, hands folded like he was waiting for permission to exist. Caleb across from him, taking up space the way he always did, confident and loud. Aunt Sheila and Uncle Ron, who I barely knew but who showed up to everything Caleb related like groupies. Mrs. Beaumont from next door, who had no reason to be there except my mother loved an audience. Caleb's girlfriend Rachel Strong, blonde and perfect and wearing his Letterman jacket, and my cousin Lily at the end, staring at her plate like she wished she could disappear into it. 9 people. Not one of them had said happy birthday when I walked in. Dinner was pot roast and potatoes. Green beans almondine rolls my mother had baked that morning. Everyone ate and talked about Caleb's acceptance to state, about his summer internship with Uncle Ron's construction company, about how proud everyone was. I pushed food around my plate and tried to smile at the right moments. My father glanced at me once, something sad flickering in his eyes, but he looked away before I could hold his gaze. Then the cake came out. My mother carried it from the kitchen, white frosting with pink roses, and set it in front of me. I waited for the candles, for the song, for the bare minimum acknowledgement that this dinner was supposed to be about me, but there were no candles. The cake just sat there, blank and cold. My mother didn't even look at me when she set it down. Instead, she raised her wine glass, crystal catching the chandelier light, and smiled at the table. To Caleb, she announced, her voice bright and proud, who makes us proud every single day. Everyone cheered. Glasses clinked. Rachel kissed Caleb's cheek. Aunt Sheila beamed like he'd just cured cancer. And I sat there, 18 years old, on my 18th birthday, completely invisible. My throat closed up. My hands shook in my lap. I dug my nails into my palms just to feel something other than the humiliation burning through my chest. That's when Caleb laughed, loud and careless, the kind of laugh that gets everyone's attention. He leaned back in his chair, grinning at me across the table. Honestly, Hannah, he said, shaking his head like I was the punchline to a joke, only he understood. We wish you weren't even born. Imagine how peaceful this family would be. The table erupted. Laughter, real laughter, from every single person sitting there. Uncle Ron slapped the table. Rachel covered her mouth, giggling. Even Mrs. Beaumont chuckled behind her napkin, and my mother, my own mother, smirked. Actually smirked. She took a sip of her wine and said, calm as Sunday morning. Well, he's not wrong. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet final break, like a bone that's been cracked for years finally giving way. I stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood. Every face turned toward me, still smiling, still waiting for me to laugh it off. To sit back down and take the joke like I always did, but I couldn't. My voice came out cracked and small. Nothing like I wanted it to sound. Then I'm dead. Silence dropped over the table like a curtain. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, no one moved. No one breathed. They just stared at me. Frozen mid-laugh glasses, half-raised forks suspended in air, and then my mother sighed. Long and exasperated like I'd spilled juice on her good tablecloth. Oh, sit down, Hannah, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Stop making things about you. I didn't sit down. I turned and walked out of that dining room, my vision blurring. My chest so tight I thought my ribs might crack. I heard chairs scraping behind me, someone saying my name, but I didn't stop. I ran upstairs to my room, slammed the door so hard the frame rattled and locked it. Then I collapsed on my bed and lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what had just happened. Trying to figure out how the people who were supposed to love me could hate me so completely. I didn't leave my room for 2 days. My mother knocked once, told me I was being childish, and left a sandwich outside my door that I never touched. Caleb didn't come at all. My father knocked on Sunday night, whispered Hannah, through the door, but I didn't answer, and eventually I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. On the second night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep, staring at the shadows on my ceiling. The house was quiet, too quiet, and then I heard it, voices coming up through the heating vent in my floor. My parents' bedroom was directly below mine, and sometimes when they talked late at night, sound traveled through the old ductwork. I rolled onto my stomach and pressed my ear to the vent. My father's voice first, low and urgent. We should have told her when she was younger. Veronica, this isn't right. She deserves to know. And then my mother's voice, sharp and cold as a blade. No. She'll never know. It ruins everything. Do you understand me, Walt? Everything. I froze. My heart hammered so hard I was afraid they'd hear it through the floor. Told me what would ruin everything. I pressed closer to the vent, holding my breath, but their voices dropped to whispers I couldn't make out. Then silence. A door closing? Nothing. I lay there for hours, my mind racing, replaying those words over and over. Back then, I thought they were talking about my feelings. About the dinner. About how they'd hurt me and maybe, just maybe, felt guilty about it. I thought the secret was that they didn't love me, and they were deciding whether to finally admit it out loud. I was 18 years old and I thought I'd already discovered the worst truth about my family. But I was wrong. So completely, devastatingly wrong. Because they weren't talking about my feelings at all. They were talking about my entire existence. About something they'd buried so deep that even after 18 years it could still ruin everything. And I wouldn't find out what it was for 6 more years. When a stranger would walk into my life and tear open the lie my mother had built around me like a tomb. I left Ashford Glen 3 weeks after my 20th birthday with 2 suitcases and a bus ticket to Kansas City. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving except my father, and even then I did it through a note slipped under his workshop door. I couldn't bear another conversation with my mother. Another lecture about responsibility or family loyalty or how I was throwing away the life they'd given me. The life they'd given me, as if existing in the shadow of their golden sun was some kind of gift I should be grateful for. Kansas City felt like oxygen after years of suffocating. The city was big enough that I could walk down streets where no one knew my name, where no one expected me to be anyone's disappointing daughter or invisible sister. I got a job at a small publishing house doing editorial work. Moved into a studio apartment with creaking floors and a window that overlooked a coffee shop. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. I started writing again. Really writing. Not just the sad journal entries I'd hidden under my mattress as a teenager, but actual stories with characters who got happy endings. That's where I met Ethan Morgan. He came into the publishing house one Tuesday afternoon looking for information about submitting a manuscript. He was 28, tall in an unassuming way, with brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled, and a steadiness about him that made me feel safe. We talked for 20 minutes about his book, a thriller he'd been working on for 3 years, and when he left, he asked if I'd like to have coffee sometime. Not as an editor, he clarified. As Hannah, I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. Ethan became my whole world faster than I'd intended. He was patient with my silences, the way I'd disappear into my own head sometimes. He told me my writing was beautiful, that I had a voice worth hearing. He met my walls with gentleness instead of frustration. For 2 years, we built something I thought was real. He proposed on a Sunday morning in his apartment. No grand gesture, just him holding a simple ring and asking if I'd build a life with him. I cried and said yes because I wanted so desperately to belong to something, to someone who actually wanted me back. But even 300 miles away, I couldn't escape my mother. She called constantly, her voice sharp through the phone line, asking why I hadn't visited, criticizing my job, my apartment, my choices. You're wasting your potential, Hannah. You always have. When I told her about Ethan, there was a pause, and then she said, well, let's hope he has better judgment than you do. I should have hung up. I should have cut her off completely. But some sick, broken part of me still wanted her approval. Still believed that maybe if I did everything right, she'd finally see me. Caleb showed up unannounced twice that first year. My mother sent him to check on me as if I were a child who needed supervision. He'd stay for an hour, look around my apartment with barely concealed judgment, ask invasive questions about my finances and my relationship, and then report back to her. I knew he did because she'd call the next day with commentary on everything he'd observed. It was surveillance disguised as concern, and I was too tired to fight it. When Ethan and I got married, I was 26. and desperately hoping that marriage would finally give me the family I'd never had. We kept it small, just immediate family and close friends, at a venue outside the city with string lights and wildflowers. My family sat in the front row. My mother wore cream, which everyone knows you're not supposed to do at someone else's wedding, and cried during the ceremony. But I knew her tears weren't for me. They were for the audience, for the neighbors and church friends who'd driven in, for the performance of being a loving mother. My father looked uncomfortable in his suit. Caleb brought Rachel, who was his fiancée by then, and they whispered through the vows. Ethan was perfect that day. Steady, present. He held my hands and promised to love me, to choose me, to build something new with me, and I believed him. God, I believed him so completely. At 30, I gave birth to Nora on a freezing January morning. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with dark hair and eyes that looked at me like I was her entire universe. The moment they placed her in my arms, something shifted in my chest, something fundamental and unbreakable. I looked at her tiny face and understood for the first time what love was supposed to feel like. Unconditional, fierce, the kind of love that would burn down the world to keep her safe. She became my reason for everything. My reason to keep going when the darkness crept in. My reason to believe I could be better than the family I came from. But when Nora turned 3, everything started to crack. Ethan grew distant in ways I couldn't explain. He'd come home late from work, distant and distracted, answering my questions with half sentences. He stopped asking about my day, stopped reading my writing. Some nights he'd sit at his desk for hours with the door closed. And when I'd knock, he'd tell me he was working, but I never heard typing, just silence. The family gatherings got worse too. My mother insisted we come back to Ashford Glen for every holiday, and Ethan always agreed before I could protest. She'd hover around him at these dinners, refilling his drink, laughing at his jokes, treating him like the son-in-law she'd always deserved. And he'd sit there soaking up her attention while she ignored me completely. While Caleb made passive-aggressive comments about my parenting, while I held Nora on my lap and tried not to scream. One Thanksgiving, I walked into the kitchen to get Nora some water and heard my mother's voice, low and pointed. She was talking to Ethan by the sink. I froze in the doorway, hidden by the angle of the wall. "You're too good for her, Ethan," my mother said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "She's unstable. Always has been. Even as a child, there was something wrong with her." I waited for him to defend me, to tell her she was wrong, that I wasn't broken, that I was his wife and he loved me. But he didn't. He just stood there, nodding slowly, listening like she was a therapist giving him a diagnosis he'd suspected all along. "I've noticed," he said quietly. "Just that. I've noticed." I backed out of the kitchen before they could see me, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped Nora's cup. I didn't confront him. I didn't say anything. I just smiled through the rest of the dinner and drove home in silence while he stared out the window. 3 months later, I was cleaning Ethan's desk looking for Nora's birth certificate for preschool registration. He was at work. The house was quiet. I opened the bottom drawer, the one he always kept locked but had left open that morning, and found a manila folder wedged beneath some old notebooks. The label read, "Piers Morgan Compatibility Case." My heart stopped. I pulled it out with trembling hands and opened it. Inside were counseling notes, pages and pages of them typed in clinical, detailing sessions I had never attended, conversations I had never had. There were descriptions of my emotional instability, my difficulty maintaining relationships, my unresolved childhood trauma. None of it was in my handwriting. None of it was even accurate. But there it was, documented like fact, like evidence in a case being built against me. Beneath the notes were letters, handwritten letters between Ethan and my mother, dated back 3 years, back to before Nora was born. My mother's handwriting, that perfect cursive I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists my whole life. "Ethan, I'm worried about Hannah's state of mind. She's always been fragile. I think professional intervention might be necessary." And Ethan's responses, typed and careful. "I understand your concern. I'll look into options." My hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled. I kept digging. At the bottom of the folder was a report, official looking with a letterhead I didn't recognize. Family Psychological Assessment, Piers Morgan Case Study. It was signed at the bottom in blue ink. Dr. Garrison Hale. That name punched through me like a bullet. I dropped the folder and grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself because I knew that name. I'd seen it before 6 years earlier when I was 18 years old and broken on my birthday. On the envelope that sat on our dining room table, the one labeled Pierce Family Record Confidential. The one with only 3 names listed. The one that didn't include mine. Dr. Garrison Hale had signed that too. I stood there in Ethan's office, surrounded by lies and paperwork and manufactured evidence, and I realized with horrifying clarity that this wasn't random. This wasn't just Ethan pulling away or my mother being cruel. This was coordinated, planned. They'd been building something together. Some case against me, using doctors and reports and forged counseling notes. But why? What were they trying to prove? What were they trying to do? I closed the folder with shaking hands and put it back exactly where I found it. I didn't confront Ethan when he came home. I didn't call my mother and scream. I just played along, smiled, and cooked dinner, and put Nora to bed because I needed time to think. Time to understand what I'd stumbled into. Because that name, Dr. Garrison Hale, connected everything. My 18th birthday, the secret my mother had been hiding, and now my marriage, my husband, the father of my child, they were all part of the same web, and I was trapped right in the center of it by the time I turned 34. My marriage to Ethan had become a performance we both pretended to believe in. We moved through our days like actors who'd forgotten their lines, going through the motions for Nora's sake. He slept in his office most nights. I stopped asking why. The folder I'd found stayed hidden in his desk, and I never mentioned it. I was waiting. For what? I didn't know. A confession, an explanation, some sign that the man I'd married was still in there somewhere. Then my mother called in late June. Her voice clipped and insistent through the phone. "Hannah, the family reunion is July 14th at Lake Brimstone Lodge. You'll be there. No excuses. No dramatics." I started to protest, to say that Nora had swimming lessons and Ethan had work, but she cut me off. "We have important guests attending this year. Family legacy is at stake. You will show up and you will behave appropriately. Do you understand me?" I didn't understand. I never understood anything when it came to my mother. But I said yes because saying no to Veronica Pierce had never been an option, not in 34 years. She called 2 more times that week to confirm, each time emphasizing the important guests. Like I was supposed to know what that meant, like I was supposed to care. Lake Brimstone Lodge was 2 hours north of Ashford Glen, a sprawling timber building that overlooked dark water and pine trees. The Pierce family had been holding reunions there every 5 years since before I was born. Gatherings I'd learned to dread. 50 people crammed into one space, all of them connected to Caleb's success or my mother's social standing, all of them perfectly content to pretend. I didn't exist unless someone needed a target for a joke. We arrived on Saturday afternoon, Nora chattering excitedly in the back seat about swimming and s'mores while Ethan drove in silence. The parking lot was already full. I recognized cars belonging to aunts and uncles and cousins I barely knew. People who sent Christmas cards to my parents but never to me. We unloaded our bags and walked toward the main lodge, and that's when I saw them. My mother stood on the wraparound porch greeting guests, and beside her were people I didn't recognize. A tall man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a blazer despite the summer heat. A younger woman with a tablet taking notes while my mother gestured animatedly. And Caleb's business partners, Trevor and Benji Klein, brothers who'd helped him build his construction empire, both watching me as I approached like I was a specimen under glass. My mother's face lit up when she saw us, but not for me. Never for me. "Ethan, Nora, so wonderful you could make it." She swept down the steps and kissed Ethan's cheek, then scooped Nora into a hug that looked warm for anyone watching. Then her eyes flicked to me, cold and assessing. "Hannah, you made it, good." The man in the blazer stepped forward, extending his hand to Ethan. "Dr. Garrison Hale," he said smoothly. "I've heard so much about you." Ethan shook his hand, smiling in that easy way he used to smile at me, and I felt my stomach drop. Dr. Garrison Hale, the name from the folder. The name from the envelope 18 years ago? He was here, in the flesh. At my family reunion, my mother gestured to the woman with the tablet. "This is Meredith Klein, Dr. Hale's assistant. They've been consulting with us on a very important family project." Meredith smiled tightly and nodded but didn't offer her hand. She just kept typing on her tablet, glancing at me occasionally like she was cataloging my reactions. I wanted to run, to grab Nora and get back in the car and drive until we hit an ocean, but Ethan was already walking inside with Dr. Hale, laughing about something I didn't hear, and my mother had her hand on my elbow, guiding me firmly toward the lodge like I was a child who might wander off. "Smile, Hannah," she murmured in my ear. "We have appearances to maintain." The lodge's great room was packed with people, long tables set for dinner, a fireplace roaring even though it was July, children running between adults holding cocktails. Caleb stood at the center of it all, commanding attention like always, his arm around Rachel, who was pregnant with their 3rd child. Trevor and Benji flanked him like bodyguards. When he saw me, he raised his glass in mock salute. There she is. The prodigal sister returns. Everyone turned to look. 50 pairs of eyes, some curious, some amused, some pitying. I forced a smile and gave a small wave, then grabbed Nora's hand and headed toward the far corner where the kids' activities were set up. I needed space, air, distance from whatever was happening here. Dinner was unbearable. We sat at a long table, my mother at the head, Dr. Hale to her right, Ethan beside him. I was shoved between Aunt Sheila and Cousin Lily, with Nora on my lap because there weren't enough chairs. The conversation swirled around me. Talk of business ventures and real estate deals and Caleb's latest projects. My mother kept glancing at Dr. Hale, some unspoken communication passing between them that made my skin crawl. Halfway through the meal, my mother stood and tapped her crystal glass with a knife. The room fell silent. She smiled that practiced smile I'd seen 1,000 times, the one she used at church functions and charity events. "I want to make a toast," she announced, her voice carrying across the room. "To resilience. 2 families who learn to weather imperfections. To those who stand strong even when certain members test our patience and our faith." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Uncomfortable laughter. The kind that comes when people know something mean is being said but aren't sure if they're allowed to acknowledge it. Ethan laughed. Actually laughed. My own husband sitting 20 feet away laughing at my mother's thinly veiled insult. Caleb stood raising his own glass. "Some people just weren't meant for real life," he said, his tone light but his eyes fixed on me. "But we manage. We adapt. We make accommodations." More laughter. Aunt Sheila patted my hand like I was a dog that needed comforting. Nora looked up at me, confused, sensing something wrong but too young to understand what. My stomach knotted so tight I thought I might be sick. I set down my fork and stared at my plate, willing myself to disappear, to evaporate, to cease existing right there at that table. But then I saw it. Dr. Hale had set his briefcase on the floor beside his chair, and sticking out from beneath it was a binder. Navy blue, thick, with a white label on the spine. I squinted, trying to read it from across the table without being obvious. Project Ashford line, subject HP Hannah Pierce. My initials, there was a project about me. With my initials on a binder at a family reunion I'd been commanded to attend, my heart started hammering. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over Nora, mumbling something about needing the restroom. I walked toward Dr. Hale's side of the table, trying to look casual, trying to look like I was just passing by. But before I could get close enough to see more, my mother materialized beside me like a shadow. Her hand closed around my wrist, nails digging into my skin hard enough to bruise. She leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear, her voice so low only I could hear it. "Leave it," she hissed. Not a suggestion, a command. Her nails dug deeper, and I bit back a gasp. "You will go back to your seat. You will smile. You will not make a scene. Do you understand me, Hannah?" I nodded because I had no choice. She released my wrist and I stumbled back to my seat, cradling my arm, feeling the half-moon indents her nails had left in my flesh. I sat down and picked up my fork with shaking hands, pretending to eat, pretending I was fine, but I kept glancing at that binder. Project Ashford line, subject HP. What did that mean? What were they planning? Why was there a project with my name on it? The dinner dragged on. Dessert came, some elaborate cake my mother had ordered, and everyone praised it while I pushed crumbs around my plate. Nora wiggled in my lap, bored and tired, asking when we could go swimming. I whispered that we'd go soon, just a little longer, even though all I wanted was to grab her and run. Then Nora slipped off my lap. Before I could stop her, she darted across the room toward the fireplace where some other kids were playing. I called after her, but she didn't hear me, and I stood to follow, weaving through the crowd of relatives. That's when I saw Nora stop beside Dr. Hale's briefcase. She crouched down, curious the way 5-year-olds are, and reached for the binder sticking out from under it. "Nora, no." I called, but she'd already pulled it free. The binder fell open, papers spilling across the hardwood floor. I rushed toward her, my heart in my throat, and Dr. Hale turned in his chair, his face going pale. My mother stood abruptly, knocking over her wine glass, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. But Nora had already seen it. She held up a piece of paper, her little face scrunched in confusion. "Mommy, why's your picture in here?" she asked, loud enough for half the room to hear. "And why does it say terminated?" The room went silent, completely, utterly silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork froze midair. I reached Nora and took the paper from her hands, and my entire world tilted sideways. It was a hospital document, dated March 1980, the month I was born, and at the top, in bold red letters, was a stamp I didn't understand. Adoption, termination, subject return to biological family. I looked up. My mother's face had gone white. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. Dr. Hale was gathering papers frantically, shoving them back into the binder, and Caleb stood frozen across the room, his glass still raised, his expression caught between panic and something that looked almost like guilt. I held that paper in my shaking hands and realized that my 5-year-old daughter had just done what I'd spent 34 years too afraid to do. She'd torn open the lie, and now there was no putting it back. I'm going to write Acts V and FIA as continuous narrative. since they flow together as the climax and resolution. Here's the complete script. 2 days after the binder fell open on that lodge floor, after my mother had ushered everyone out with forced smiles and excuses about family drama, after Ethan and I had retreated to our room in horrible silence, Nora found it again. The binder. Someone had left it in the lodge library, tucked behind a stack of old National Geographic magazines. And my daughter, curious and fearless in ways I'd never been, had gone looking for it. She was 9 years old now, not 5. Old enough to read. Old enough to understand that something was very wrong with the way her grandmother looked at her mother. I was sitting in the dining hall that morning, nursing cold coffee and trying to figure out how to get us out of this reunion early, when Nora walked in. She moved with purpose, her small hands gripping that navy blue binder like it was evidence in a trial. The morning sunlight caught her dark hair, so much like mine, and I saw determination in her eyes that took my breath away. She walked straight to me, past tables of relatives eating breakfast and pretending the night before hadn't happened, and placed the binder in front of me with a soft thud. "Mom," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet room, loud enough that conversations stopped and heads turned. "They wrote about you like you're not part of the family." My heart stopped. Every person in that room froze, forks suspended, coffee cups halfway to lips. My mother stood near the buffet table, her face going rigid. Ethan turned from where he'd been talking to Uncle Ron, his expression caught between horror and something that might have been shame. Caleb, sitting with Rachel and their kids, went pale. Nora opened the binder. Her small fingers flipped through pages with careful precision. Pages covered in clinical language and charts, and my name repeated over and over like a case study. She found what she was looking for and turned the binder so I could see, so everyone could see. Her voice rang clear as she read the header aloud. Subject, Hannah Pierce. Status, unintended birth. Recommendation, social redirection and marital restructuring. Goal, remove subject HP from primary lineage preference. My vision blurred. The words swam on the page, but I could see them. Could read the cold clinical language that reduced my entire existence to a problem that needed solving. Unintended birth, removed from primary lineage preference. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. Nora kept reading, her young voice steady, even as mine would have broken. At birth, subject HP was not approved by maternal authority. Recommendation, psychological distancing, and controlled family involvement. Prepared by Dr. Garrison Hale, requested by Veronica Pierce. The room erupted. Not in shouts, but in gasps and whispers and the scraping of chairs as people stood. Aunt Sheila dropped her plate, eggs scattering across the floor. Cousin Lily covered her mouth with both hands. Trevor and Benji Klein exchanged looks that said they'd known. They'd been part of this, and they were calculating their exit strategy. Ethan stood abruptly, his face drained of color. "Veronica," he said, his voice shaking. "What is this? What the hell is this?" But Nora wasn't finished. She turned another page, reading with the careful pronunciation of a child sounding out difficult words. A marriage proposal arrangement is advised for Caleb Pierce. Avoid entanglement with subject HP due to hereditary emotional volatility. Recommended age for subject's marital placement 24 to 26. Marital placement. They'd arranged my marriage. They'd found Ethan, vetted him, placed him in my path like a chess piece. My stomach lurched and I thought I might vomit right there at the breakfast table. Aunt Sheila's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and accusatory. "Veronica, you planned her out of the family. Your own daughter? You documented it like she was a business liability." My mother didn't flinch. She stood there by the buffet table, her back straight, her chin lifted, and she looked at me with eyes so cold they could have frozen fire. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, like she was discussing the weather. She was never supposed to exist. The words landed like a bomb. Someone gasped. A chair clattered to the floor. But my mother continued, unshaken, unstoppable. "Hannah was a mistake, an accident that threatened everything we'd built. Our reputation, our standing, Caleb's future. So, yes, we made arrangements. We created structure. We managed the situation as best we could. Managed the situation, that's what I was. A situation to be managed?" Ethan stumbled backward, his hand running through his hair, his face twisted in something between disgust and panic. "Jesus, Veronica," he breathed. "What did you drag me into? You told me Hannah needed support, needed stability, needed someone to help her. You never said this was never." He couldn't finish. He just stared at her, then at me, then at the binder still open on the table. Nora's small hand reached into the binder again, into a hidden sleeve I hadn't noticed, and pulled out another document. This one was older, more worn with a different letterhead. She held it up and read in a voice that had started to shake. "Phase 2 begins when subject turns termination recommended at psychological breaking point." Termination. The word echoed in the sudden silence. Termination, not relocation. Not separation, termination. Termination. My hands started shaking so violently I had to clasp them together. Termination of what? Of my marriage? Of my connection to the family? Or something worse? Something I couldn't let myself think about because, if I did, I'd shatter completely. Nora looked up at me, her eyes too knowing for 9 years old, too aware of what she'd just uncovered. She whispered, but in that silent room everyone heard her. Mom, they wanted you gone. Before I was even born, the world tilted. The floor seemed to drop away beneath me. I looked around that room at faces I'd known my whole life. Aunts and uncles who'd ignored me at Christmas, cousins who'd excluded me from games, my brother who'd openly wished I'd never been born, my mother who'd spent 34 years making that wish feel like prophecy, and Ethan, my husband, who'd been brought into this web of control and manipulation to help them manage me. I stood on legs that barely held me. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw no remorse, no shame, no recognition that she'd done anything wrong. She believed she was right. She'd always believed she was right. I picked up the binder, I took Nora's hand, and I walked out of that dining room without a word, through the lobby, out into the bright July morning. Behind me I heard chaos erupting, voices raised, accusations flying, but I didn't stop. I went straight to our room, threw our belongings into suitcases, and 10 minutes later we were in the car. Ethan followed, stammering apologies I couldn't hear through the ringing in my ears. We drove away from Lake Brimstone Lodge and I didn't look back. But before we left the parking lot, Aunt Sheila caught up to us. She tapped on my window, breathless, clutching an old envelope yellowed with age. I rolled down the window and she pressed it into my hands. "It's time you saw this," she whispered, glancing back at the lodge like she was afraid of being caught. "I should have given it to you years ago. I'm sorry, Hannah. I'm so sorry." Then she was gone, hurrying back inside before anyone could see her. I opened the envelope with shaking hands while Ethan drove. Inside was a birth certificate, official, stat-issued with a seal and signatures. But it had been altered. 2 names were crossed out in thick black ink, almost violently. Like someone had pressed so hard the pen nearly tore through the paper. My name, Hannah Pierce, was written in above the crossed-out names in handwriting I recognized. My mother's handwriting. Next to mother it read, "Unknown female," and at the bottom, a note in official type, reassignment records, approved by V. Pierce. Legal guardian status granted. My mother wasn't my mother. Not biologically. She had taken me in, claimed me, raised me, but not because she wanted a daughter. Not because she loved me. She'd done it to control me, to manage me, to use me as a prop to make Caleb look better by comparison, to make herself look charitable and maternal. I wasn't her mistake. I was her project. We drove for 6 hours in near silence. Nora fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from being braver than any child should have to be. Ethan tried to explain, to apologize, to tell me he'd been manipulated too, that he hadn't known the full extent of it, that he'd thought he was helping. I let him talk because I didn't have words yet. I was too numb, too shattered, too busy trying to understand that my entire life had been a lie orchestrated by a woman who saw me as nothing more than a burden to be managed. 2 weeks later, I went back to Ashford Glen one last time, not to the lodge, but to my childhood home, the house where I'd spent 18 years feeling like a ghost. My mother was in the kitchen when I arrived, arranging flowers like nothing had happened, like her entire world hadn't been exposed as a carefully constructed cruelty. She looked up when I walked in, and her face showed nothing. No guilt, no regret, no humanity. Just that cold assessment I'd lived under my entire life. I stood across from her and asked the only question that mattered anymore. What purpose? My voice was barely a whisper. You said I was meant to serve a purpose. What was it? She set down her scissors. She looked at me like I was simple, like the answer should have been obvious. To make Caleb look perfect, she said flatly. Someone had to be the broken one, Hannah. Someone had to be the problem child. The difficult one. The one who struggled. It made everything he accomplished shine brighter. It gave our family a narrative of overcoming. You served that purpose beautifully. I left. I walked out of that house and I never went back. Ethan and Nora and I moved to Seattle 2 weeks later. We found a small house near the water, far from Missouri, far from family reunions and false faces and mothers who saw their children as chess pieces. Therapy became my religion. Dr. Angela Rowe, patient and kind, helped me understand that I wasn't broken, that I'd been systematically broken by people who were supposed to protect me. The healing was slow, painful, real. Some days I could breathe. Some days I couldn't. But I was free. Ethan and I are still together, though I'm not sure if we're rebuilding or just coexisting. He swears he didn't know the full truth, and I want to believe him. Maybe I will someday. Nora is 11 now, thriving in a city where no one knows the Pierce family name. where she can be herself without the weight of someone else's narrative crushing her this morning. 6 years after I stood at that 18th birthday dinner and said, "Then I'm dead," a letter arrived. Plain white envelope, no return address, postmarked from Ashford Glen. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with one handwritten line in ink I recognized. My mother's handwriting. "You escaped the role we gave you, Hannah, but the story isn't over." My hands are shaking again. That cold dread I thought I'd left behind in Missouri has followed me here, across state lines into the life I've built. The story isn't over. What does that mean? What else could she possibly have planned? What other documents exist with my name labeled as subject, as problem, as thing to be terminated? And tomorrow is Nora's birthday. My bright, brave daughter turns 12 tomorrow. And I'm supposed to bake a cake and hang streamers and pretend that everything is fine. But all I can think about is that letter. That threat? That promise that they're not done with me yet. I look at Nora sleeping peacefully in her room, and I wonder if I've escaped it all, or if I've just been waiting in a larger cage for the next phase of whatever sick plan my mother has been orchestrating since the day I was born, the day I wasn't supposed to exist, the day she decided I would serve a purpose. And tomorrow, on my daughter's birthday, I'll smile and sing and blow out candles. But I'll be watching the door, because the story isn't over. And I don't know what comes next. If you made it this far, you need to hear what happens next. So subscribe and hit that bell, because this isn't over. Comment below what you think that letter means and whether I should open the next one that just arrived. Your support means everything to someone who spent a lifetime being erased.